All right, welcome to review for Chapter 2 test. And throughout this review, you can use your formulas, the three different formulas for slope, for equations of a line. You can use your slope formula, right? All that stuff I think is given to you on the test. Y2 minus Y1, X2 minus X1, that's your slope formula. Other thing about this review video, it's going to be way more beneficial if you try the questions before watching my solutions. That's what the test is, right? A bunch of random questions, and you have to, make sense of them and answer them without help. So when you do these questions, have your notebook out, have your calculator out, have your formulas out, and do it. Don't just watch. All right. So the first thing is it a function? Yes or no? And there's that rule to be a function for each input, right? So here's our input. For each one of those, there can be only one output. So yes or no, is this a function? And then I'm waiting for you to pause and try it yourself. So this one is yes, each input has only one output. So if you look, our inputs are -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, and none of those repeat. So kind of by default, each one of those inputs, it has one output, specifically the output that's right there. Okay, so it fails again on an example where if we had, say, another point where the input x was 2, and we had a different output like 5, then it would no longer be a function. All right, but the way it is written, this one is yes. Okay, same question, just a different version of that, right? A graphical version. So yes or no? Okay, and this one would be an example of no. And so graphically, you can do what's called the vertical line test, which is you draw a bunch of vertical lines, and if you ever have it cross more than one point, then it's not a function. Okay, and if we were to list these, if I actually list some of these points, this one would be 4 and 2, this one would be 4 and 1, and this one would be 4 and 0. So we can see, if we do it the way we did the last question, we can see that the input 4 has multiple outputs, and so it is not a function, right? But the simplest way is just to draw vertical lines, and if it crosses more than once, it's not a function. Okay, direct variation. So this one asks about direct variation, and the equation that's relevant is the direct variation equation, which is y equals some constant times x. So basically it's slope-intercept form, but with no y-intercept, right? It has just a slope. So your job is to see if you can figure out what k is and then complete the equation. Actually, there's a follow-up part here, but all right, so we're looking for some equation that's in this form, kx, and we can figure out the slope because y is 43 when x is -129. So if I plug those in and solve this, right, I'm going to divide by -129 on both sides. All right, and I think that comes out to be -1/3. So that tells us that k is -1/3. So our equation is y is equal to -1/3 times whatever x is. All right, and so if it asks for the equation, we'd be done. But then it asks a follow-up question of what is y when x is -153. So we actually have to find y here, put in -153. Okay, and so we're going to do negative times negative, and I think that comes out to be just +51. So this would be our equation, and then the question they're asking here, well, our answer is y51. Hope that makes sense. This is kind of a goofy one, so reach out if it doesn't make sense. Okay, so finding slope, right? Slope is just like the steepness of the line. It's the rise over the run. You also have the little slope formula. So slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, so see if you can find the slope. It's different in each question here, but see if you can find the slope 3 times. All right, so first one is just the slope formula, and you can really do the x's or y's kind of in any order. I kind of like circle the y's to make sure I do it right. And the way most kids do it, they do this one first. So 12 minus 4. And then sometimes you pick the 12 first, pick the 3 first when you do the x's. So 3 minus negative 1. So we end up with 8 over 4. This becomes a plus down there. And that just is a slope of 2. All right, parallel and perpendicular. So perpendicular, again, they make an X like this, and they make a right angle. Sorry, I didn't draw that very well. But there should be one negative one and one positive one for perpendicular, right? So we have the negative one. Looks like -6 is our slope. All right, and so then the positive slope is you just do the reciprocal. So I'm going to do 1/6, and that one's got to be positive because this is a negative slope. So if we need to be perpendicular, we have positive 1/6. And please note that we're not writing the equation, right? We're not doing an mx plus b equation here. We're just doing just the slope part, just the m part of that equation, right? We'd have to do something else to figure out the y-intercept. Okay, last one, I know parallel is going to be the same slope, right? So two lines that look like that don't cross. And the only trick here is 5 isn't the slope. To find the slope, you got to actually write it in this y equals mx plus b first. So if we minus 5x from both sides, then we can see our slope right there. So in this case, our m slope is -5 over 1, because it's the same slope as the original line, right? So you probably have to do this a few times on the test where you find the slope. Yeah, if you want to practice this one more time, I guess that's important. This one does have kind of a twist to it. I'll throw the equation up there for you one more time. Awkward pause while I wait for you to try it. Okay, here we go. So to keep them straight, I'm going to circle my y's. And sorry, that's not great, but 6 minus -4. I'm doing them in this order this time. Over 2 minus 2. So I got 10. That becomes a plus over 0. And the reason why this one's a little different is we got the 0 on the bottom. And so if you were to type that in your calculator, right, you'll get this weird thing. Let's try typing it in once. 10 divided by 0. Oh, and you can't divide by 0, right? So basically you get an error, and so this slope is an undefined, right? So if you get a slope with 0 on the bottom, you have to know that it's undefined. If the 0 was on top, which is 0 over 10, that's just a 0 slope. Okay, so those are kind of two special cases, right? The undefined slope graphically looks like that, and the 0 slope looks like that graphically. All right, so that I think does come up in some form or another on this test. All right, this one is a super easy, the math of it, but kids don't understand function notation. So pause the video and see what you can remember on this one before continuing. What function notation is? This is a function named f that takes in input x. So f is not a variable. Remember, it's the name of the function. And so what this little notation means is take the f function and input -5 for x, and what do you get for the output? That's what it wants to know. What is your output? So we're going to say f of -5, and we're just going to put -5 in for x. All right, and that's going to be 15 plus 2, 17. So we say the f function, when we input -5, gives an output of 17. So I guess overall our answer is 17, but I think that notation, understanding that is really the, like understanding this statement right here. It's not f times -5. That's not the right understanding. It's a function named f, input -5, get an output of 17. And this is going to be used throughout this course, so understanding the basics of function notation is pretty important. All right, so you will have one question where you have to graph using the intercepts. And so see what you remember here. I tried to have these pictures here. Here's our y-axis, and all the points on the y-axis have a special property. Similarly, all the points on the x-axis also have a special property. So pause the video, see if you can find the intercepts. All right, so a y-intercept means x is 0. All of these points on the y-axis have an x of 0. So we're going to do a point that's x 0, y something. And so to figure out what y is, we just plug it in. So I'm going to do 2 times 0 for x minus 3y equals 24. All right, and then that's just a 0, so we get negative 3y equals 24. Divide by negative 3, and you get negative 8. All right, similarly then, so sorry, I should plot that. So here's our y-axis, and we're crossing. It's kind of low, but we're at 0 and negative 8. All right, and then the x-intercept, right? All of these x-intercepts have y-coordinates of 0. So make y 0 and plug it in. So we have 2x minus 3 times 0 has to be 24. So this is just a 0, so we get 2x equals 24, which means x is 12. Right? So that's our other point is 12, 0. And I ran out of space. If I was using this coordinate plane on the right, 12, 0 would be way out there. But anyways, once you have those 2 points, you can use the points to graph the line. So I think on the test, you have to find the intercepts and then draw the graph. So sorry, I kind of ran out of space, but I'm using this grid over here to plot the 2 points, and then I tried to connect them even though I missed there, but that's what our line looks like. So it's graphing by finding the x and y intercepts. Okay, so you'll have these on the test, right? You'll have, I used to make kids do a note sheet, but I think we just put them on top of the test now. So here's your 3 forms, and you have to rewrite it in slope intercept. Slope intercept has y alone, so basically we just got to do some algebra steps. So I'm going to minus 2x, so I get negative 5y, excuse me, equals negative 12 minus 2x, and then divide by negative 5. So we'll get y alone, and then these negatives will cancel out, so it'll be 12 fifths, or 2.4, plus 2 fifths x. Right? So that is the equation written in slope intercept. Oftentimes people want to put the x part first, so if that bothers you the way I've written it, you can always put the x part first. For me, I don't really care. It's the same thing. The order when you add 2 numbers doesn't matter, so either one works. Okay, these are tricky ones, and I guess just to help you understand it a little bit, I'm going to sketch a picture. All right, so we want to write the equation of a line that's perpendicular to this one, right, and goes through this point, right? So rough picture of what we're talking about here. The original line starts at 1 and has a slope of up 5 over 1. So it's a pretty steep slope, right? So that's going to be our line. All right, and we want to be perpendicular to it. So in truth, there is actually infinite lines that are perpendicular to that line, right, that make a right angle. But we want the one that goes through 5 and negative 10. So it'd be way down here, right? Here's 5, negative 10. Okay, so we want the one that has that is perpendicular with the line and goes through that point, right? So we got to find the equation for this line way down here. I'll try and highlight in green. Sorry for the poor drawing, but that's just conceptually help us. And so the key is this is a new mx plus b line. All right, and so the trick is the slope we know has to be, if it's perpendicular, we're going to flip it and make it negative, so negative 1/5. And then since we have this point, I'm going to write it in point slope first and convert it to mx plus b. So I'm going to do y plus 10 equals slope negative 1/5 times x minus 5. All right, and then I guess you could leave it there. If it doesn't say what form, you could leave it in point slope. But if I want to convert to slope intercept, it's pretty easy. Just distribute that to get negative 1/5 x plus 1, negative times negative, and then minus 10, and you get negative 1/5 x minus 9 would be the equation of that green line.